Hello everyone. CPI inflation number came in today for April that it was at 8.3%. So markets sold off today. The Dow, the S&P, and the Nasdaq, and crypto had another bloodbath. And we had several people that asked if gold and silver is an inflation hedge, why is gold and silver down if inflation is at a record 40+ year high? And that's a great question, and we've had this continuously. So it's tough to rationalize complete insanity. So we've talked about in prior videos that the US dollar is the king of the dipshits, and why gold and silver is not performing well as an inflation hedge right now is the US dollar is up versus other currencies. So we had the video that gold price in other currencies, that gold has performed well in other currencies, but inflation is a global phenomenon throughout the world that, as we've talked about, that every major central bank is committed to devaluing the currency before dealing with any reality. And as we've talked about and mentioned, that the US, the Federal Reserve, can print the fastest and print the most. And right now, with raising rates, the Fed has higher interest rates than Japan and Europe and other places that they have record low interest rates in history. So why the dollar is performing well is the fact that the US, we get away from the greatest blessing of the greatest Ponzi scheme in the history of the world, that the US, we can send our greatest export dollars to Brazil and they'll send us coffee. We can send dollars to Japan and they'll send us electronics. We can send dollars to Germany and they'll send us a Mercedes. So we get the benefit of temporarily benefiting from basically exporting this inflation. But this inflation has caused humanitarian problems out throughout the world. Because more than half the US dollars are outside of the United States, which most Americans don't realize. Given an example, I was in Cambodia in February of 2020, and Cambodia uses the US dollar. So we had kids that would come up and ask for $1. So the amount of purchasing power that I was able to have in Cambodia, just being able to go to the markets in different places, is substantial on the exchange. So I always remember this. I had a European that came up to me and said, "You realize that the problems in Cambodia is because of the US. And I was like, yeah, I get it. That's why I'm here trying to help out and spend some dollars and kind of give it back to them. But that's essentially just an example of what's going on, is that the US, we get away with a scam. So the US dollar being the currency in a place like Cambodia has caused major issues, and I've seen it firsthand. It just, goods that should be cheaper were a little bit more expensive because they're using the US dollar. So the biggest reason why precious metals are down, a reason that I always look to, is what's the US dollar doing versus other currencies. I'm just gonna read a snapshot from an article that I wrote. This was when we were 6 years in business, and put in my opinion that gold at 1,050 and silver at 1,370 at the bottom in US dollar terms in December of 2015. And the metals have been openly manipulated on paper to suppress the price. And I've talked about this for a while, that the gold and silver markets being manipulated is akin to the real estate markets, where you had top 3 credit rating agencies were bought by the big banks. And it's the same thing with the commodities regulators. They're bought and paid for by the big banks, and they are there to make sure that the prices are to make the US dollar look stronger than what it is. And this is one quote that we had in the article that I wrote. The public deserves some answers to their concerns that the silver markets are being and have been manipulated, and there have been fraudulent and devious efforts to control the price. I believe the violations to the Commodities Exchange Act, CE, have taken place in the silver market, and that such any violation of the law in this regard should be prosecuted. This was Bart Schoen, the former Commodities Future Trade Commissioner, comments in 2010. Another big reason is the fact that gold and silver is traded on futures contracts. So we talked about this quite often, that a futures contract on silver is 5,000 ounces of silver, 5,000 ounce silver bars, and gold is a 100 ounce gold bar and a COMEX delivery bar. So they are not small purchases at one time. But in the silver market a month and a half ago, even I think we linked this video, that this is not the silver breakout you're looking for monetary metals. And there was too much leverage and speculation in the market. And when the market drops, like we've seen with the Dow and S&P, that there's margin calls, and it's easier for them to sell gold and silver, which they can get liquidity in 24 hours rather than sell something else. So that's what we saw in March of 2020, was a liquidity sell-off, and this is not quite similar, but there's too much leverage and speculation in the market, and this is been a paper-driven and correlated attempt to take it down. In thinly traded market hours, the price has gone down. Gold $40 and silver has dropped, about $1 plus. So this is something that's gone on since JP Morgan took over Bear Stearns short position in 08, and this has happened since HSBC has been the custodian of GLD and JP Morgan the custodian of SVL. You have the fox scattered in the hen house on both. And lastly on this, it's just always good to keep a big picture perspective and look over the long haul. And that's why you hold gold and silvers over the long haul. And price drops are just blips on the radar screen. They're wonderful opportunities to add to your position and personal security. And wild springs in the market are just something you have to get accustomed to. And it's all part of the game. Always an important reminder this time when you get a price drop like we've seen, that big picture perspective, that you can't solve problems with too much debt consumption and spending, and with more of the same, that it's complete insanity, the Fed raising rates. We've seen this game, we've seen this act, and they're gonna have to lower them after they go up to a certain points and the market throws a hissy fit and goes down, like we've already seen with just a small rate. We've seen this game play out already, and the end result this time will be the same, and that will be much higher gold and silver prices down the future. But in the meantime, you're gonna have to stomach the swings and the volatility and some short-term downside.